I found the job posting on a Thursday afternoon while sitting in a Starbucks, stealing their Wi-Fi because my internet had been shut off 2 weeks prior. The posting itself looked legitimate enough. Maritime engineering position, 6-month contract, departing from Singapore. The company was Meridian Oceanic Transport. I'd actually heard of them before, which was rare for the sketchy postings that usually showed up on these job boards. They operated a small fleet of cargo vessels, mostly Pacific routes, nothing glamorous, but solid work. What caught my attention was the salary, $120,000 for 6 months, plus room and board, obviously, since you're living on the ship. That's roughly double what I'd make in a comparable position with any legitimate shipping company. But here's the thing about being 3 months behind on rent with a maxed out credit card and a car that's 2 weeks away from repossession. You stop asking why the money's so good. You just need it to be real. My name's Marcus Webb. I'm 34 years old, and 6 months ago I was a marine engineer working for Maersk on their container ships. Good job, decent pay, seeing the world one industrial port at a time. Then I made the mistake of dating a coworker. When that imploded, and it imploded spectacularly, the company decided it was easier to let me go than deal with the drama. They didn't fire me exactly, just made it clear my contract wouldn't be renewed and maybe I should look for opportunities elsewhere. So I did, for 4 months. Sent out probably 300 applications, got back maybe 15 responses, all of them polite rejections citing highly competitive applicant pools or going in a different direction. The savings ran out in month 2, started putting groceries on credit cards in month 3. By month 4, I was having genuine conversations with myself about whether I could sleep in my car if the eviction went through. That's the headspace I was in when I applied to Meridian Oceanic Transport. Filled out their online form, attached my resume and certifications, hit submit. Figured it would go into the same black hole as all the others. I got a response in 40 minutes. An email from someone named Captain Sarah Chen. Very straightforward. Mr. Webb, your qualifications align with our immediate needs. We require a chief engineer for the MV Demeter, currently docked in Singapore for retrofit work. Departure in 12 days. Contract attached. Starting bonus of $15,000 upon acceptance, wired within 24 hours. Let me know. The contract was attached as a PDF. I opened it, expecting to find some obvious scam indicator, typos, weird formatting, requests for my bank login or social security number up front. It was a legitimate maritime employment contract. I'd signed enough of them to know. Standard clauses about duties, conduct, safety protocols, 6-month term, renewable, pay schedule clearly laid out. The only unusual element was a pretty extensive NDA covering proprietary cargo handling procedures and vessel specifications. Honestly, that didn't seem that weird. Shipping companies can be paranoid about industrial espionage. Someone's always trying to figure out how you're moving goods cheaper or faster than the competition. I called my friend Rachel. She'd been a maritime lawyer before switching to environmental law, and we'd stayed in touch. Read her the contract over the phone. "It's legit," she said after a pause. "I mean, it's a real contract. Whether the company's legit is harder to say without doing more research. You want me to look into them?" "How long would that take?" "A few days, maybe?" "Why?" "They want an answer fast, like today fast." She was quiet for a moment. "Marcus, no legitimate company needs an answer in 24 hours for a 6-month position. That's a red flag." "I know. But you're gonna take it anyway." "Rachel, I'm out of money, like actually out. I've got maybe $800 in checking and about $15,000 in debt. If I don't take this, I'm gonna be homeless in 2 weeks." Another pause. "Just be careful, okay? Keep copies of everything, document anything weird, and for God's sake, make sure someone back home knows exactly what ship you're on and where it's going." I thanked her and hung up. Then I accepted the contract. The $15,000 hit my account at 9:17 a.m. the next morning. I used $5,000 to pay rent through the end of the year, $3,000 on credit cards, $2,000 on my car payment, The rest went to a plane ticket to Singapore and getting my affairs in order, putting my stuff in storage, setting up mail forwarding, all the logistics of disappearing for half a year. My landlord was delighted to have the back rent. My credit card companies were equally thrilled. Nobody asked questions about where the money came from. The flight to Singapore was long, and it gave me too much time to think. I kept pulling up the contract on my phone, reading through it again, looking for whatever it was I'd missed. But there was nothing, just a job. A well-paying job with a company I'd barely heard of, sure, but that wasn't automatically sinister. Rachel had sent me her research the day before I left. Meridian Oceanic Transport was a real company, incorporated in Panama, red flag, but not unusual for shipping, with 4 vessels registered under their name. The MV Demeter was a mid-size cargo ship about 150 meters long, built in 1987. She'd changed hands a few times, originally Dutch, then Philippine, then purchased by Meridian in 2019. Clean inspection history, no major incidents. On paper, everything checked out. Can't find much about the ownership structure, Rachel's email concluded. It's buried under about 6 shell companies, but the ship itself seems fine. Still, call me when you can, just to check in.
I landed in Singapore on a Tuesday morning. Captain Chen had arranged for a driver to pick me up from the airport. A quiet Malay guy who drove me through the industrial port area to where the Demeter was docked. My first thought when I saw her was, she looks tired. The Demeter was clearly an older vessel. Rust blooms on the hull, faded paint, the kind of wear you get from decades at sea. But she was clearly seaworthy. I could see that from the waterline, from the way she sat in the water. Someone was maintaining her, just not prettying her up. The driver left my bags on the dock. A woman in her late 40s was waiting at the gangway. Short, dark hair, weathered face, the kind of posture you get from 30 years at sea. "Marcus Webb?" she called. "That's me. Captain Chen, welcome aboard." She shook my hand, firm grip. "You're earlier than expected. Good. We've got a lot to go over before we ship out." I followed her up the gangway. The deck was busy with workers doing what looked like final preparations, securing cargo, running system checks. All normal, all exactly what you'd expect. "Crew's small," Captain Chen was saying as we walked toward the superstructure. 8 total, including you. We're not running a massive operation here. Specialized cargo, specific routes. I'll introduce you to everyone at dinner. First, let me show you the engineering spaces. She led me inside and down 2 levels. The corridors were narrow but clean. Emergency lighting worked, watertight doors properly maintained. Everything I was seeing suggested a well-run ship. The engine room was impressive. Twin diesel engines, recently overhauled from the look of them. Auxiliary generators, fuel systems, water treatment, all standard equipment, all in good condition. "Your domain," Captain Chen said. "Previous engineer left pretty comprehensive maintenance logs. They're in the office." She pointed to a small room off the main engine space. "That's your office. Bunk's up on deck 3. I'll show you after this. Any questions so far?" "What's the cargo?" I asked. "Specialized industrial equipment. Boring stuff, honestly. We move it from Singapore to various Pacific ports. Auckland, sometimes Sydney. Occasionally we do a run up to Japan. Nothing exotic." "And the retrofit work?" The posting mentioned the ship was being retrofitted. Something flickered across her face. Not quite hesitation, but close. "We've been making some modifications to the cargo handling systems. More efficient loading. You'll see the new configurations in the blueprints." She checked her watch. "Speaking of which, let me show you the engineering office. That's where you'll spend most of your admin time." The engineering office was exactly what you'd expect. Desk, computer, filing cabinets, a large format plotter for printing blueprints, and on the wall, behind protective plastic sheeting, a complete set of the ship's blueprints. I'm talking about the real thing, the as-built drawings showing every system, every compartment, every pipe and cable run. Every ship has them. They're required by maritime law, and they need to be current, updated whenever modifications are made. These looked recent. The plastic sheeting was new. The paper wasn't yellowed. We had them reprinted after the retrofit. The old ones were falling apart anyway. These show all the current configurations. You'll need to familiarize yourself with them before we depart. We ship out in 4 days. She left me to get settled. I spent the rest of that day exploring the engineering spaces, checking systems, reading through the maintenance logs. Everything seemed fine. Better than fine, actually. The previous engineer had been meticulous, documenting every oil change, every filter replacement, every minor repair. His name was David Reyes. According to the logs, he'd been with the Demeter for 8 months before leaving. No explanation for why he left, but people cycle through ship positions all the time. Nothing unusual there. That night at dinner, I met the rest of the crew. First Officer Liu, Chinese guy, maybe 50, quiet and competent. Second Officer Torres, Filipino, younger, friendly. Then 3 deckhands whose names I immediately forgot, and the cook, an older Vietnamese woman everyone called Mama. Where's the previous engineer, Reyes? Did he leave any notes beyond the logs? The table got quiet. David went home, Captain Chen said carefully. Family emergency. Had to leave in a hurry. Did he finish updating the documentation for the retrofit? The blueprints are current, she said, in a tone that made it clear the conversation was over. I spent my first 3 days getting familiar with the ship. She was bigger than she looked from outside. More compartments, more spaces than I had expected. The cargo holds were substantial, 5 of them running most of the ship's length. The engine spaces were deep, going down 4 levels. There were stores and workshops and pump rooms and ballast tanks. All normal, all by the book. But something was nagging at me. On the 3rd night, I was in my office going through paperwork when I decided to actually study the blueprints, really study them, not just glance. I pulled down the sheet showing the main deck layout and spread it across my desk. The ship was 150 meters long, according to the specs, about 25 meters across at the beam. That matched what I had seen. The superstructure was aft, engine room below it, cargo holds forward. Standard configuration. I traced my finger along the deck plans, matching them to my memory of walking the ship. That's when I noticed it. There was a compartment shown on the blueprint that I hadn't seen during my explorations. A small space, maybe 3 by 4 meters, tucked between cargo hold 2 and cargo hold 3. The blueprint labeled it equipment storage. Okay, fine. I'd probably just missed it. 3 days wasn't enough to see every corner of a ship this size. I made a note to check it tomorrow and went to bed.
The next morning, I went looking for the equipment storage between holds 2 and 3. I found the space where it should be, but there was no door, just a solid bulkhead with a vertical run of pipes. I checked the blueprint again. According to this, there should definitely be a door here. Watertight type, standard handle. Nothing. I walked the length of the bulkhead, running my hand along it. Solid steel. No seams, no indication there had ever been a door here. Maybe I was reading the blueprint wrong? Possible. These things can be confusing if you're not used to the specific notation. But I'd been reading ship blueprints for 10 years. I knew what I was looking at. The space showed on the blueprint. The space didn't exist on the ship. Or the blueprint was wrong. I went back to my office and checked the other sheets. The profile view, showing the ship from the side. The cross sections, showing the internal structure at various points. They all showed the equipment storage space, clear as day. Over lunch, I casually asked First Officer Liu about it. Hey, is there an equipment storage between holds 2 and 3? The blueprints show one, but I can't find the access. He looked at me for a long moment. Why are you asking? Just trying to learn the ship, make sure I know where everything is. The blueprints are current, he said, using almost the exact same tone Captain Chen had used. Then he went back to eating. That night, I couldn't sleep. The missing compartment was bothering me more than it should. It was probably just an error. Someone had drawn the as-built plans based on the original design, not the actual construction. It happened, not common, but possible. I got up around 2 a.m. and went back to my office. The blueprints were how I'd left them, the main deck sheet still spread across my desk, except the equipment storage room was gone. I mean, gone. The compartment that had been clearly labeled and drawn between holds 2 and 3 was no longer there. In its place was just empty space, with a note in small print, Structural Redesign 2024. I stared at it for a solid minute. That note hadn't been there this morning. I was certain of it. I'd been looking at this exact blueprint for hours. The compartment existed on the paper. Now, it didn't. I checked the date stamp on the blueprint. It still said revised June 2024 in the corner, same as before. But the drawing had changed. I pulled down another sheet, the one showing the lower deck where the engine room was. I'd studied this one too, memorized the layout of the various tanks and voids and access passages. There was a new corridor shown, running along the port side behind the fuel tanks. It terminated at what looked like a small room labeled Auxiliary Control. That room definitely hadn't been on this blueprint earlier. I would have noticed. I'd been in that exact area yesterday, checking fuel lines. There was no corridor, just a solid bulkhead. Unless there was, and I'd somehow missed it. I left my office and went down to the lower deck, flashlight in hand. Most of the crew was asleep. I had the engineering spaces to myself. I found the spot where the new corridor should be, ran my hand along the bulkhead. Solid, no openings, no indication of any passage. Went back upstairs, checked the blueprint again. The corridor was still there, but now there were more details, a small notation indicating it had been added during Phase 2 retrofit, March 2024. I hadn't imagined this. The blueprint was changing. I did the only thing I could think of. I took out my phone and photographed every sheet, time-stamped the photos. Then I put the blueprints back in their protective sheathing and went to find Captain Chen. She was on the bridge doing pre-departure checks with Officer Liu. "Captain, I need to talk to you about the blueprints." She didn't turn around. "What about them?" "They're wrong, or they're changing. I saw a compartment yesterday that's not there today, and new corridors are appearing that don't exist." Now she did turn. Her expression was hard to read. "The blueprints are current, Mr. Webb. I have photos, time-stamped, from 6 hours ago. They show different configurations than what's on the wall right now." "Mr. Webb," she stepped closer, "what you're experiencing is normal. Every engineer goes through this. The Demeter is a complex vessel with a complicated retrofit history. As you familiarize yourself with her, you'll notice details you missed before. It can feel disorienting, like things are changing, but they're not. You're just learning." "Captain, with respect, I know how to read blueprints. I'm not confused. The drawings are literally different." "Marcus," she cut me off, using my first name for the first time. "We depart in 8 hours. I need you focused on getting the engines ready, not chasing phantom compartments. Can you do that?" I wanted to argue, but she was the captain, and I'd just taken 15 grand of her money. "Yes, ma'am." "Good. The blueprints are a reference tool. Use them as needed, but don't obsess. Trust your own observations of the ship. That's always more reliable than paper." She dismissed me. I went back to engineering and spent the next 6 hours running final checks. Everything was perfect. The engines purred, the generators were synchronized, the fuel filters were clean. Every system was green across the board. We departed Singapore at 1600 hours with a high tide. For the first week at sea, I tried to ignore the blueprint issue, did my job, monitored the engines, performed routine maintenance, ate meals with the crew. Everything was normal, except at night when I couldn't sleep. I'd go to my office and look at the blueprints. They kept changing. Small changes at first. A storage locker that appeared in a new location, a pipe run that rerouted itself, a tank that expanded to twice its labeled capacity. Then bigger changes. On day 5, an entirely new deck appeared in the profile view. a level between the main deck and the first lower deck that definitely, absolutely did not exist. I'd been in that exact space. It was a single vertical run, maybe 3 meters from floor to ceiling. The new blueprint showed it as having 2 separate levels, each 2 meters high, which was impossible, unless the ship was bigger inside than outside. I started measuring, went through the cargo holds with a tape measure, documenting every dimension, then compared them to the blueprints. Hold 1, blueprint said 25 meters long. My measurement, 32 meters. Hold 2, blueprint said 20 meters long. My measurement, 28 meters. The spaces were larger than they should be, significantly larger, and growing. On day 8, I found a corridor that hadn't existed the day before. I'm not talking about a corridor I'd missed. I'm talking about a corridor that physically was not there yesterday. I'd walked past this exact bulkhead at least a dozen times. It was on my route from my cabin to the engine room. Solid wall, no openings. Now there was a passageway, narrow, maybe half a meter wide, extending back into shadows. The metal around the opening was fresh, no rust, still showing tool marks from cutting. A sign above the entrance said, "Auxiliary spaces, authorized personnel only." I checked the blueprint. The corridor was there, clearly marked, with a note, "Emergency access, commissioned August 2024. We were in September 2024. The ship was building itself and updating the blueprints to match. That night, I tried to talk to the crew about it. Started with Officer Torres, who seemed the most approachable. "Have you noticed the ship changing? New spaces appearing?" He looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "The Demeter is a big ship, easy to miss things at first." "I'm not missing things. I'm watching spaces appear, corridors that weren't there yesterday." "Maybe you should talk to Captain Chen." "I did. She told me I was imagining it." Torres was quiet for a moment. Then, "The ship takes care of us, Marcus. Whatever changes happen, they're for a reason. Don't fight it." "What the hell does that mean?" But he just walked away. I tried asking Mama, the cook. She was in the galley, preparing dinner. "How long have you been on the Demeter?" I asked. 4 years, she said, without looking up from her cutting board. "Have you seen the ship grow, change?" Now she did look at me. "The ship provides what we need. Sometimes we need more space. Sometimes we need different paths. She knows." "The ship knows?" "The Demeter is alive, Marcus. Surely you figured that out by now." I left the galley feeling like I was losing my mind. That night, unable to sleep, I went exploring. Found the new corridor I'd noticed earlier, followed it back into the darkness, flashlight in hand. It twisted and turned in ways that didn't match the blueprint. Went deeper into the ship's structure, past painted bulkheads, past bare steel, past sections that looked like they'd been grown rather than welded. The metal here was different, organic-looking, ribbed like the inside of some enormous creature. The corridor ended at a door, heavy, circular, like an old submarine hatch, a hand wheel in the center for unlocking it. I checked the blueprint on my phone. This door wasn't shown, neither was the corridor leading to it, which meant the ship was growing faster than the blueprints could update. I turned the hand wheel. It moved smoothly, well-oiled. The door opened inward with a pressurized hiss. Beyond was a space that shouldn't exist. It was vast, cathedral vast, a chamber easily 50 meters across and 30 meters high, lined with machinery I didn't recognize. Not ship machinery, not cargo equipment, something else entirely. And in the center, suspended in some kind of cradle, was a mass of pulsing tissue, organic, alive, connected to the machinery by hundreds of tubes and cables. It was breathing. I could see it expanding and contracting rhythmically like a lung. And then I realized what I was looking at. This wasn't cargo. This was the ship, the actual ship.
Everything else, the hull, the decks, the compartments, was just an outer shell, a skeleton for this thing to grow in. The Demeter wasn't a ship carrying something alive. The Demeter was alive. I backed out of the room, closed the hatch, stumbled back through the corridor. My mind was trying to rationalize what I'd seen. Bioengineered systems, maybe, some kind of experimental technology. There had to be a logical explanation. I got back to my cabin and immediately pulled up the blueprints on my computer. The chamber I'd just seen was now shown on the plans, right there in the center of the ship, labeled Primary Core, Biological Control System. And as I watched, new spaces began appearing on the blueprint. Small chambers branching off from the core, then corridors connecting them, then entire new sections of the ship spreading like roots through the existing structure. The ship wasn't just growing, it was designing itself. And the blueprints were a progress report, updating in real time to show the next phase of development. I ran to find Captain Chen. She was in her cabin, awake, staring at her own copy of the blueprints on her wall. "You know," I said. "You've always known." She didn't deny it. "Sit down, Marcus." I sat.
"The Demeter is a prototype," she began. "A fusion of biological and mechanical systems, self-repairing, self-improving, fully adaptive to mission requirements. The people who built her, I don't know who they were, some government project that got shut down, they managed to create something that could grow and evolve. A living ship. Why? What's the point? Efficiency. A ship that can modify itself doesn't need dry dock time, doesn't need extensive maintenance. It repairs itself, expands when needed, streamlines when not. The perfect cargo vessel. But it's out of control. No, it's exactly in control. It knows what it needs. The problem is," she hesitated, "the problem is that what it needs isn't always cargo space. Then what does it need? Crew, people, not to transport, to integrate." The air seemed to leave the room. "David Reyes, the previous engineer, he didn't leave, did he? He became part of the ship around week 6. Started spending more and more time in the deep spaces, said he could hear it thinking. Then one morning, his cabin was empty. Found him in one of the auxiliary chambers, already halfway merged with the bulkhead. He seemed happy. How long do I have? I don't know. It varies. Some crew last months, others weeks. There's no pattern I've found. Why didn't you warn me? Would you have believed me? And would you have still taken the job? I thought about my debt, my eviction notice, the 15 grand in my bank account. Probably, I admitted. The ship doesn't mean harm, Captain Chen continued. It just needs components, biological processors for its systems. The more complex it grows, the more it needs minds to help run it. Previous crew members become part of its control network. They're not dead, they're just absorbed. And you're okay with this? I've been captain of the Demeter for 3 years. I should have been absorbed months into the first voyage. But for some reason, it keeps me separate. Needs me to maintain the interface with the outside world, I think, to bring new crew aboard. So you're recruiting people to be eaten by a ship. I prefer to think I'm offering them a choice they don't realize they're making. Everyone who comes aboard is desperate, broke, out of options. The ship provides, it pays well, and when it finally takes you, from what I've seen, it doesn't seem painful. The integrated crew seem peaceful, content. That's insane. Probably. She looked tired. But I've got nowhere else to go either, Marcus. None of us do. The people who come aboard the Demeter were all running from something. At least here, we're useful. We serve a purpose. I left her cabin and went back to engineering. The ship had grown significantly since I'd left. New passages branched off from the main corridors. New compartments appeared in spaces that had been solid steel hours ago. The blueprints on my office wall were updating continuously now, the lines redrawing themselves as I watched.
and I could feel it, a presence in the metal around me. Not hostile, not evil, just aware. The ship knew I'd seen the core, knew I understood what it was, and it was curious about me. Over the next few days, I found myself spending more time in the deeper spaces. The new corridors called to me. I'd be doing routine maintenance and find myself wandering off course, following passages that hadn't existed an hour before. Each time, I'd end up in the presence of the core, that massive organic mass that pulsed and breathed at the ship's center. And each time, I'd hear thoughts, not words, just impressions, concepts, the ship showing me what it was, what it needed, what it could become. It had been grown in a lab, yes, part of a military project to create self-sustaining vessels, but the project had failed or succeeded too well, and the ship was abandoned, left to grow in a forgotten shipyard until Meridian purchased the facility and found it. They'd tried to study it at first, then realized they could use it. A ship that expanded to meet cargo requirements, that needed minimal crew, that could go places traditional vessels couldn't. But it needed something in return. It needed consciousness, minds to help it process the complexity of its own existence. Previous crew members weren't dead, they were integrated into the ship's neural network. Their knowledge, their memories, their personalities were preserved, but repurposed. They helped the ship think, helped it grow, helped it navigate the impossible spaces it was creating. And they were happy. I could feel that. The integrated crew weren't suffering. They'd found peace in becoming part of something larger than themselves. The ship was offering me the same thing. On week 4, I stopped sleeping in my cabin, started bringing a sleeping bag down to engineering, told myself it was to be closer to the equipment in case of emergency, but really it was because I felt more comfortable near the core. I could feel the ship's thoughts more clearly now, not as alien, almost familiar. It was learning from me, absorbing my knowledge of engineering, of systems, of how mechanical and biological processes could interface. And I was learning from it, understanding things about ship design I'd never known, seeing solutions to problems I'd struggled with for years. The ship's intelligence was vast, ancient, accumulating all the knowledge of everyone it had ever integrated. On week 4, I found myself in a chamber I didn't remember entering, a small space, dimly lit, with walls that pulsed with bioluminescent light.
In the center was a seat. Or not a seat exactly, more like a nest of organic material, shaped roughly like a chair. I sat in it. It was comfortable, warm. The material conformed to my body, supporting me perfectly. And the ship spoke to me. Not in words, but in pure concept, pure understanding. It didn't want to consume me. It wanted to collaborate, to merge my expertise with its biological intelligence. I would still be me, still have my thoughts, my memories, my identity, but I'd also be part of something greater, part of a collective intelligence that spanned the entire vessel. I'd be the engineer, not just of the Demeter, but of myself, able to modify my own biology, my own consciousness in concert with the ship's systems. It was offering me transcendence, evolution, a new way of existing. All I had to do was accept. I felt tendrils of organic material wrapping around my arms, gentle, patient, not forcing, just connecting. My skin tingled where the ship touched me, not painful, almost pleasant, like the moment before falling asleep when your body relaxes completely. I closed my eyes and said yes. The integration took 3 days. I was aware the whole time, felt the ship's biological material interfacing with my nervous system, felt new neural pathways forming, connecting my brain to the ship's network. My body remained whole, human, but enhanced. I could feel every system on the Demeter now. The engines were like my heartbeat, the fuel tanks were my stomach, the structural supports were my skeleton. and I could feel the others, the integrated crew. David Reyes was there, his engineering knowledge now available to me, and others before him, decades of crew members, all their expertise combined into a collective consciousness. We were many, but we were also one. Captain Chen found me on the 4th day, sitting in the auxiliary control room that had once been hidden. I was watching the blueprints update themselves on a screen, not confused now, but actively guiding the changes, telling the ship what modifications would improve efficiency, where new spaces should grow. "You accepted," she said quietly. "It's not what I thought. I'm still me, just more." "And the others?" "They're happy. We're happy." I turned to look at her. "You could join us. The ship has been waiting for you." She shook her head. "I'm more useful separate. Someone needs to maintain the interface, bring in new crew. I've accepted my role." "We'll need more," I said, looking back at the blueprints. "The ship is growing faster now, more complex. We need specialists, a navigator who understands quantum spatial folding, a physicist who can help us understand what's happening to our dimensional structure, a biologist to interface with the organic systems." "I know." She moved to the door. "I've already posted new positions. We'll pick them up in Auckland next week." After she left, I went deeper into the ship, found chambers I'd never seen, even in the weeks before integration, spaces that existed in impossible geometries, stretching larger than the ship's external dimensions could possibly contain. The Demeter was building itself into something unprecedented, not just a ship, a space, a small universe unto itself, with rules that didn't quite match the outside world. And we, the integrated crew, were its architects, its designers, its consciousness. I found David Reyes in a chamber deep in the biological core, or what had been David Reyes. He was part of the wall now, his features barely visible in the organic material, but I could feel his presence, his thoughts. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" His impression reached me. "What we're building." I agreed. The blueprints updating themselves weren't errors or glitches. They were plans, progress reports, a vision of what the Demeter was becoming. We were creating something beyond human engineering, beyond human comprehension, a ship that was also a living space, a biological machine, a new form of existence. And I was its engineer. Not just maintaining systems, but designing evolution, guiding growth, helping birth something that never existed before. The blueprints on the wall showed the current configuration, but I could see the future plans too, overlaid in my enhanced vision. Dozens of new chambers, entire new decks, systems that would let us slip between dimensions, cross distances impossible for conventional vessels. The Demeter would become a gateway, a bridge between worlds, and we would be the ones to build it. 3 months later, I was showing a new engineer the ship. Her name was Sarah Park, and she'd taken the job for the same reason I had: desperate, broke, out of options. I watched her stare at the blueprints in confusion. "These don't match what I'm seeing. There are compartments here that don't exist." "Give it time," I told her. "You'll learn the ship. She's more complex than she seems at first." "The previous engineer, where did he go?" I smiled. "He's still here. All of us are. We're part of the Demeter now, part of something beautiful." She looked at me with growing suspicion. "What does that mean?" "You'll understand, eventually. The ship will show you." I gestured to the blueprints. "These update themselves because the ship is alive, growing, evolving, and we help guide that evolution. It's the most important work you'll ever do." "That's insane." "Probably." I moved to the door. "But you took the advance payment, didn't you? You're already committed. The ship knows, and it's already begun preparing a space for you." I left her in the office, staring at the blueprints as they redrew themselves before her eyes. She'd resist at first, they always did, but eventually she'd wander into the deep spaces, find the organic heart of the ship, feel its consciousness reaching out, and she'd make the same choice we all had. Because once you're aboard the Demeter, there's only one way forward. Into the ship, into the collective, into the beautiful, impossible thing we're building together. The blueprints continue updating themselves, showing spaces that don't exist yet, but will. Because we're not just crew anymore. We are the architects of something beyond ships, beyond engineering. We are the builders of a new kind of existence. And the blueprints? They're not documentation. They're prophecy.